Yo, it's Chris, and this is a review of the Wooting 60HE Plus gaming keyboard. And let me start off by saying that until recently, I haven't put a lot of focus on keyboards, but on other peripherals, and keyboards were always something that I put on the back burner. That is, until I tried the Wooting. The Wooting 60HE retails for around €190, which is pretty steep, but it doesn't feel like you're getting ripped off at all since the quality is pretty damn good. While it is not the best, it's not even remotely close to the worst. And the only area that I could say that it was cheaped out on would be the case, and that is only because it's made out of plastic, which isn't bad at all, but I will get into that a little bit later. But anyways, if the 60% form factor doesn't interest you at all, the Wooting will be releasing an 80% version, which is awesome. Before getting further into the review, I just have to pause for 1 second and mention that over 98% of you are not actually subscribed. So please, if you can, hit that subscribe button and the bell right next to it if you're enjoying my content. Now, without further yapping, let's get back to the video. Just to add some context, I switched to this keyboard directly from my old modded Ducky 12 Mini, and while I always hated that keyboard, I never really understood why everyone was all of a sudden jumping on the HallEffect trend. To stay true to myself, I kept being a hipster and I didn't want to follow trends, but eventually I broke and got this keyboard right here, and let me tell you what an upgrade that was. From low quality, scratchy garbage, I went to this well-built, smooth HallEffect beauty. If you're asking yourself, what the hell is HallEffect? Let me try to explain it as best as I can. It's still a mechanical keyboard with individual switches, but instead of it being a traditional mechanical keyboard relying on actual contact, it instead uses magnetic fields, which allow the keyboard to read how far down you've pressed the key, which further gives you the option of adjusting the distance the key has to travel before it gets registered. You can adjust the distance on every individual key, which can give you a great advantage in video games. For example, in Apex, it gives you an insane freedom of movement that you can't really replicate on your standard mechanical keyboard, or in Valorant, it makes shoulder peeking much easier and much more responsive. Also, adjusting the travel distance of specific keys made hitting super glides in Apex much easier and way more reliable than ever before. The typing experience on this keyboard was initially a huge shock, and typing on it was basically impossible. I kept pressing keys due to low actuation, I kept typing when I didn't want to, but after using it for just over a month now, I can absolutely say that sticking with my settings and this keyboard was absolutely worth it. I'm not a professional speedwriter at all, and my typing scores would make your grandma seem like the Flash, but now my typing is back to how it used to be, but a bit more consistent. Do keep in mind that the consistency of typing could entirely be placebo, but the typing experience and feel was a huge improvement over my previous keyboard. The sound is obviously not the best ever since this is a gaming-oriented keyboard, but since that is extremely subjective anyway, I will let you decide for yourself whether you like it or not. For me personally, the Wooting sounds very close to how I want my endgame keyboard to sound, and instead of wasting your time by talking about it any further, I will just show you the sound test. The stock Wooting is using the Lecker switches with a 60-gram Actuation Point spring, and for them being stock, these switches feel very nice and smooth, possibly due to them being factory lubed. They are actually developed by Wooting themselves, and I have to give them huge credit because I honestly really like them. The board itself is actually hot swappable, so you can technically put in any magnetic switches your heart desires, but do keep in mind that these switches usually have a 3.5mm range of travel, while the Lecker switches actually have 4mm. This can slightly mess with your settings, but the keyboard will still work totally fine and shouldn't mess with anything too much. Personally though, I'm sticking with the Lecker 60-gram switches since I really like them, but I might experiment with other switches sometime down the line. The magnetic switches also give you the ability to use a feature called Rapid Trigger, which a normal mechanical switch cannot do. That means that it gives you the ability to decide when a keystroke should reset, so if you want your switch to reset the moment you start lifting your finger, then you can totally do that within the range of 0.15mm to 2.35mm. I am personally using 0.40mm since that to me feels perfect. I do need to mention that there is a small amount of stem wobble. It's not too much, and in actual use I can't notice it at all. but if that is something that concerns you, here you go. Earlier I mentioned the customizability of how far you want your keystroke to travel before it registers. This does range from 0.1mm to a full 4mm, which would be fully bottoming out the key. Personally, I do use 0.4mm actuation on my movement keys and my base on most other keys being 1mm. I do use a few different values on a few different keys. For example, I'm using 4mm on caps lock and 4mm on escape because I don't want to accidentally press them. Or I'm using 1.3mm for spacebar and 2mm for B to make super gliding in Apex much easier. Oh, and I did forget to mention that if you enjoy playing more single-player oriented games and you feel frustrated that you can't switch movement speed like you can on controller, look no further because thanks to the magnets and the switches, you can run or walk as fast as you want depending on how deep you push the key, thanks to their controller support. When it comes to the overall build quality, I am very satisfied with what I got, and while the case is certainly made out of plastic, the keyboard still sounds good and feels premium. There's no plastic squeaking or rattling at all, and when it comes to the keycaps, they are double shot PBT and they do feel very nice, but keep in mind that I have never tried any real premium keycaps, so unfortunately I can't tell you how these compare, but for a casual keyboard enjoyer like myself, I do like these very much. Talking about the keycaps reminds me of the modability of this keyboard, and I did already mod it myself, but for the sake of this video, I put it together how it originally came. But it is compatible with a lot of accessories such as the GOAT of aftermarket cases, that being the Soundest 60, and that is also compatible with any Cherry MX profile keycaps. You could also change the switch plate that you can luckily buy from Wooting themselves, which does save you a big headache. That specific one is made out of polycarbonate and should make the typing feel a lot bouncier because the stock version is stiff as fuck. But for gaming, honestly, it is good enough. When it comes to switching the cable, it is a bit more annoying because your average coiled cable doesn't let you use the keyboard to its full potential, but would you actually notice that in reality? Probably not. But I still do have to give you a heads up. What I personally ended up modding is the case, which I switched to the Tofu 60 Redux in black. I also burger mounted the PCB and I will loop the switches later today. Eventually, I will end up switching the keycaps as well, right after I decide which ones I actually like. Lastly, I would like to mention the software, which is web-based, but there is also an option to download it as well if that is something you prefer. The software itself is extremely easy to use and intuitive. I did see a few keyboard softwares, and this one is the best one by far, in my personal opinion. You can adjust pretty much anything you could think of from RGB to the aforementioned rapid trigger feature. So all of that leads me to the question, should you get one? And the answer is, maybe. While it is the best HallEffect keyboard that I'm aware of, it is also very expensive. If your budget is virtually unlimited, then I would absolutely recommend this keyboard since it is amazing and extremely moddable. But if your budget is a bit tighter, I would recommend something more budget friendly like the DrunkDeer G60 or the Akko 3061 SHE, and getting both of those would cost you around €200, while the stock Wooting is €190. If you are interested in these keyboards, all of the links are down in the description below. If you have the Wooting 60HE or the 60HE Plus, please let me know in the comments how you like it. Also, please let me know what other products you would like to see me cover in the future. I do want to mention that I do have a Twitter or an X account. My ad is on the screen right now, so definitely do give me a follow if you're interested in peripheral news or if you just want to see more of my content that is exclusive on there. All of the other links to my social media are down in the description below. And if you've liked this review, please let me know by liking this video and subscribing. You can also click the notification bell to not miss any of my future uploads. So anyways, that's it. See ya.